Hi, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome once again to Ancient Epics, the place where the greatest stories of humanity come back to life. Long before factories rose along the Atlantic coast, before rail lines carved paths through forests, and before the name of New Jersey was spoken as a modern state, there existed a wilderness feared even by those who lived beside it. In the early 18th century, colonial maps showed a vast dark space labeled with little more than swamps, sand, and shadow. Travelers avoided this region, livestock vanished within it, and whispers spread through candlelit taverns of something born not of nature but of defiance. The forgotten fact is this: one of America's oldest monster legends did not emerge from superstition alone, but from a collision of geography, religious anxiety, political rebellion, and an isolated family whose name still haunts historical records. In the winter of 1735, during a time when childbirth itself was a gamble with death, a rumor spread faster than wildfire through the colonies. A child had been born wrong, so wrong that it fled into the forests, leaving claw marks not only on doors and rooftops, but on the collective memory of a young nation. Farmers swore the sky itself reacted. Clergymen hesitated before naming the event. Printers debated whether the story should ever be inked. What made this terror endure was not merely its shape, but the place it chose as its kingdom, the Pine Barrens, one of the most geologically ancient landscapes on the eastern seaboard. This was no simple ghost story. It was a legend rooted in real families, real land, and real fear passed down across centuries until the creature became known as the Jersey Devil, the dragon baby of colonial America. The Pine Barrens stretch across southern New Jersey like a forgotten sea of green, covering more than 1 million acres of sandy soil, pitch pine, cedar swamps, and iron-rich bogs. Formed over millions of years, this land resisted agriculture and civilization alike. Its acidic soil swallowed footsteps and erased trails. Early Lenape tribes knew the region well, respecting it as a place of spirits and survival rather than conquest. European settlers, however, viewed it as cursed ground useful only for charcoal, bog iron, and exile. During the 17th and early 18th centuries, iron furnaces rose along the edges of the pines. These operations fed colonial industry, producing tools, weapons, and anchors for ships. Workers lived in harsh isolation, surrounded by smoke, mosquitoes, and superstition. Nights were filled with the cries of unseen animals, foxes, owls, and cranes echoing through the darkness. The forest became a natural amplifier for fear, and stories grew as tall as the trees themselves. Within this wilderness lived the Leeds family, whose name appears frequently in colonial documents. Daniel Leeds, an English immigrant, was a surveyor, almanac writer, and a man deeply disliked by his Puritan neighbors. His almanacs included astrological symbols and interpretations of celestial movements, practices many colonists believed flirted with forbidden knowledge. Leeds openly criticized the Quakers who dominated New Jersey politics, earning him a reputation as a heretic and troublemaker. His family, isolated both geographically and socially, became convenient vessels for rumor. By the early 1700s, the Leeds name had already been associated with the devil in political cartoons and pamphlets. Benjamin Franklin himself mocked Titan Leeds, Daniel's son, framing him as a rival astrologer whose predictions were unreliable and cursed. This public ridicule planted seeds in the colonial imagination, blending satire with suspicion. When fear seeks a home, it often chooses a family already standing at the edge of society. The legend states that in 1735, a woman later known as Mother Leeds found herself pregnant for the 13th time. Exhausted by poverty and isolation, she uttered words of despair that history would later sharpen into a curse. When the child was born, it did not remain human. Accounts written decades later describe a transformation: limbs twisting, a tail unfurling, skin darkening, and wings unfolding like those of a bat. The creature screamed, then fled up the chimney or through the night air, vanishing into the pines. Historical records do not confirm such an event, yet they do confirm the anxiety surrounding childbirth, deformity, and divine judgment in colonial America. Infant mortality was common, and birth defects were often interpreted as signs from heaven or hell. In a deeply religious society, unexplained tragedy demanded explanation, and monsters offered clarity where medicine could not. Soon after the alleged birth, reports began to circulate of strange tracks in the snow hoof-like yet clawed, appearing in towns miles apart without a clear path between them. Chickens were found mutilated, roofs scratched, and dogs refused to leave their kennels at night. The pines, already a place of unease, became a living map of terror. The creature was described differently by each witness, yet certain features endured across generations. A horse-like head, leathery wings, glowing eyes, and a shriek that froze blood. Natural historians later noted that sandhill cranes, native to the region, could produce terrifying screams and stood nearly as tall as a man. Their wingspans and red facial markings may have inspired some accounts. Yet coincidence alone cannot explain the persistence of the legend across 3 centuries. The Jersey Devil became more than a beast. It became a symbol of wilderness resisting control, of faith challenged by fear, and of a society struggling to define the boundary between the known and the forbidden. As colonies grew into a nation, the pines remained unchanged, ancient, watchful, and silent. In the years to come, the legend would resurface during wars, industrial expansion, and even modern scientific age, each time adapting to the fears of a new generation. But its roots lay firmly in the candlelit rooms of colonial America, where superstition, astronomy, politics, and wilderness converged to give birth to something that refused to die. And so, beneath the whispering pines and iron-dark soil, the story of the Jersey Devil waited, patient as the land itself, ready to rise whenever the night grew quiet enough to listen. As the 18th century advanced, the story of the Jersey Devil did not fade as many colonial rumors did. Instead, it settled into the rhythm of life around the Pine Barrens, woven into work songs, sermons, and warnings whispered to children before sleep. The land itself seemed to protect the legend. Roads dissolved into sand, maps proved unreliable, and even experienced woodsmen admitted that sound behaved strangely beneath the tall pines. A single cry could seem to circle miles away, returning from impossible directions. Naturalists who later studied the region would note that the Pine Barrens sit atop one of the largest aquifers in North America, the Kirkwood-Cohansey system. This underground sea fed cedar swamps and mist-laden bogs that breathed vapor into the night air. Light bent strangely through this fog, and fires from iron furnaces glowed like wandering stars between the trees. In such conditions, perception itself became uncertain, and fear took on shape. Throughout the late 1700s, sightings multiplied during times of hardship. During the American Revolutionary War, troops moved cautiously through southern New Jersey, wary not only of enemy patrols but of the wilderness itself. Diaries from soldiers mention eerie cries and tracks that did not resemble deer or wolf. Supply animals refused to pass through certain stretches of forest, bolting in panic without visible cause. War sharpened belief, and belief sharpened fear. The legend absorbed elements of the age. Some claimed the creature was a punishment for rebellion against divine order, while others whispered that it was a guardian spirit angered by deforestation and iron mining. Charcoal pits scarred the land, and entire sections of forest were reduced to ash to feed the furnaces. The pines, ancient beyond human memory, seemed to protest. When accidents occurred, collapsed furnaces, lost children, sudden illness, the unseen presence was blamed. By the early 19th century, scientific thinking began to spread, yet the Jersey Devil remained untouched by rational explanation. Newspapers occasionally reported encounters, often framed cautiously but never fully dismissive. Editors knew their audience. In 1820, naval hero Commodore Stephen Decatur reportedly fired a cannon at a strange flying creature while testing artillery near the coast. The shot passed through it, leaving the apparition unharmed as it vanished into the distance. Whether truth or embellishment, the story gained weight through Decatur's respected name. As America expanded westward, the Pine Barrens became an anomaly, an untamed wilderness surrounded by growing towns and industry. Railroads skirted its edges, and cities rose nearby, yet the interior remained stubbornly empty. Folklorists later observed that societies often project their deepest anxieties onto the spaces they cannot control. The Jersey Devil thrived in that psychological boundary, neither fully myth nor fully animal. In January of 1909, the legend reached its most intense resurgence. Over the course of one bitter winter week, newspapers across New Jersey, Pennsylvania, and Delaware reported dozens of sightings. Tracks appeared in fresh snow on rooftops, fenced yards, and frozen rivers. Dogs were attacked, trolley cars halted, and schools closed as fear swept through the region. Police officers fired weapons into the night air, and posses formed, their lanterns bobbing like will-o'-the-wisps among the trees. Descriptions from that week echoed earlier centuries: wings, hooves, a long neck, and a piercing cry. Some accounts even noted bioluminescent eyes, glowing faintly in darkness, a feature later attributed by scientists to reflective animal tissue or optical illusion. The event occurred during a period of intense social change. Industrialization had reshaped daily life, immigration altered communities, and old certainties were eroding. The Jersey Devil returned as if summoned by collective unease. Skeptics proposed explanations ranging from escaped exotic animals to mass hysteria. A traveling kangaroo was blamed by some, though its anatomy failed to match the tracks. Others pointed again to cranes or large owls distorted by fear and snow. Yet the sheer scale of the panic, crossing state lines and social classes, suggested something deeper than misidentification. The legend functioned as a shared language of dread, older than newspapers and stronger than reason. Scholars examining the Leeds family history found no evidence of a monstrous birth. Yet they uncovered something equally powerful: a lineage marked by political conflict, religious dissent, and public ridicule. The transformation of a marginalized family into the source of a demon followed patterns seen across cultures. In medieval Europe, families accused of heresy became witches. In colonial America, social outsiders became monsters. The Jersey Devil carried this symbolic weight, embodying fear of the unfamiliar and the defiant. Astronomical references woven into early almanacs added another layer. Daniel Leeds' fascination with planetary alignments and eclipses placed him at odds with religious authorities. In an era when comets were seen as omens and eclipses as divine warnings, astrology straddled science and taboo. Over time, the Leeds Devil of political cartoons evolved linguistically into the Jersey Devil, shedding personal accusation while retaining supernatural dread. Despite modernization, the Pine Barrens continued to produce stories. Hunters spoke of sudden silences where insects ceased their song. Hikers reported feelings of being watched among the cedars. Acoustic scientists later confirmed that dense pine forests absorb and redirect sound, creating pockets of unnatural quiet. The land itself conspired with the legend, offering sensory experiences that defied expectation. Yet the Jersey Devil was never portrayed as purely malevolent. Some traditions described it as a guardian of the forest, striking only when disturbed. Others suggested it was cursed rather than evil, bound to the pines by forces beyond its control. This ambiguity allowed the legend to endure without becoming stale. It was neither hero nor villain, but a reminder of limits of what humanity could not fully tame or understand. By the mid-20th century, the Jersey Devil had entered popular culture, but its oldest form remained strongest in oral tradition. Around campfires and in quiet kitchens, the story retained its ancient cadence. The pines still stood, their roots gripping soil older than memory, and beneath their canopy the legend rested, waiting for the next moment when fear, mystery, and silence would align once more. As the 20th century progressed and the modern world pressed closer to the edges of the Pine Barrens, the Jersey Devil did not retreat into obscurity. Instead, it adapted, as all enduring legends do, slipping quietly between folklore and psychology, between the physical land and the unseen mind. Automobiles replaced wagons, electric lights challenged darkness. Yet the interior of the pines remained resistant. Even aerial surveys revealed strange irregularities, patches of forest that seemed unchanged for centuries, threaded with blackwater streams that reflected the sky like polished obsidian. Ecologists studying the region discovered that the Pine Barrens host species found nowhere else on Earth. Carnivorous plants thrived in nutrient-poor soil, surviving by methods both elegant and unsettling. The forest lived by ancient rules, indifferent to human logic. In such an environment, it was not difficult for the idea of a surviving primordial creature to persist. Legends often cling to places where time itself appears fractured. During the Cold War era, sightings declined in newspapers but increased in private accounts. Park rangers recorded reports of wind shapes crossing moonlit clearings, accompanied by sudden drops in temperature. Though rational explanations were offered, thermal inversions, nocturnal birds, psychological projection, the experiences remained deeply personal to those who encountered them. Fear, after all, does not require proof to be real. Folklorists noted an important shift. Earlier generations spoke of the Jersey Devil as a consequence of sin or curse. Later generations described it as a warning or sentinel. This evolution mirrored broader cultural changes as humanity began to recognize the cost of domination over nature. The pines had been logged, mined, burned, and scarred, yet they endured. The creature associated with them transformed from demon to symbol, embodying the land's refusal to be erased. Scientific inquiry continued to circle the legend without extinguishing it. Zoologists explained track patterns as overlapping animal prints distorted by melting snow. Psychologists discussed mass suggestion and inherited memory. Astronomers even noted that some major waves of sightings coincided with meteor showers or unusual atmospheric conditions when light and sound behave unpredictably. Each explanation illuminated part of the mystery, yet none captured its whole. What gave the Jersey Devil its power was not physical evidence, but continuity. Very few American legends could trace their lineage so clearly through documented families, political conflict, printed satire, and geographic isolation. The story was not imported from Europe fully formed. It evolved on American soil, shaped by colonial fear, revolutionary unrest, and industrial anxiety. In this way, it became a uniquely American myth, older than the nation itself. The Pine Barrens today are protected land, their silence guarded by law. Yet silence does not mean emptiness. At night, the wind still threads through needles high above the ground, producing tones that resemble distant voices. The calls of foxes echo like laughter, and owls glide unseen between branches. The same sensory ingredients that fueled the legend in 1735 remain intact. Cultural historians argue that the Jersey Devil endures because it occupies a necessary space. It reminds civilization that not all territories yield willingly, and not all questions invite answers. In a world increasingly mapped and measured, the pines offer resistance, and the legend gives that resistance a face and wings. The Leeds family name, once burdened by accusation, has faded into history, yet the shadow cast by those early conflicts lingers. Political cartoons crumble, almanacs yellow, and iron furnaces collapse into moss-covered ruins. Still, the story breathes. Each retelling adds another layer, another century, another generation listening by firelight or beneath electric stars. In the end, the Jersey Devil is less about a single creature and more about the relationship between people and the unknown. It stands at the threshold where certainty ends and imagination begins. It survives because it was never meant to be captured, proven, or defeated. Like the forest that shelters it, the legend exists on its own terms. As long as the Pine Barrens remain, with their ancient soil and whispering trees, the dragon baby of colonial America will endure silent, watchful, and eternally just beyond the reach of understanding. If these ancient voices touch your heart today, please consider subscribing to Ancient Epics and ringing the bell so you never miss the next forgotten tale. Thanks for watching.